Madness vs. Machines, otherwise known as Oh fuck, I'm not doing this again. Welcome back to my coverage of Madness vs. Machines. And in this third and last video, we will be going over the second half of the roster. There are 49 more missions left to go, and if they're just like what came before, they will either be a doozy or hell on earth. I've been going through the maps alphabetically one by one, but I did cover all of the medieval missions in the previous part. So if you want to listen to what I have to say about them, then you can watch that. But without further ado, let's hop back in. Our next map on the list is Maple Hill. This is one of the 3 maps that hasn't really been seen past Madness, besides memes of course. Although that is for good reason considering the layout really isn't all too good, and the front here is pretty bad. Most notably its left flank being really high up and far away. Anyway, there's only one intermediate and one advanced to get through. Woodchip Wound is a 6-wave intermediate, and yeah, you already know what it is. It's just common grind fest. Woo, yeah. This intermediate does stand out a bit in a couple of ways. It starts out weird where there's plenty of commons as you would expect, but then the giants come out with massive groups of big heals. And it also has several black box supports, which makes for a tedious beginning. A couple of weird custom bots to be seen throughout, like these lumberjack punchies that eat their steak. There is also a chief variant that appears at the start of wave 5, one that also eats their steak that can also heal themselves by regeneration, and is called Lumberjack Champion Larry. The only bad custom bots here are the longbowmen that have a large pool of buff stat changes, including a headshot multiplier that'll probably give the judges today a heart attack. Aside from that, the mission is pretty inoffensive all things considered, though it does stagnate at times. There is a single giant direct hit soldier used here, and in my playthrough, it got stuck inside a tree on the left, which I find hilarious, and probably one more reason why this map hasn't been picked up. To cap the wave off is a chief blast demo that shotguns as loose cannon initially before rapid firing. They're probably supposed to burst fire, but yeah. This intermediate overall isn't too bad. Woodchip Wound is C. Sawdust Storage is a 7-wave advance. It essentially follows the same story as the intermediate here. Plenty more custom bots to go around here though. Some of them probably should not have hidden stat changes, like these giant demo knights in wave 2 that can just charge at you while swinging when normally they shouldn't. You'll also get these woodsman heavies that just have extra firing speed to add alongside the slow on hit and resist buff when using the Natasha. Wave 4 definitely has the most egregious example of terrible design, particularly with these extinction snipers. They didn't do anything in my playthrough thankfully, but these custom standing snipers just have explosive headshot and are completely exclusive to this wave. And I'll tell you the weirdest support combo I found. Engineers paired with man melter pyros. Honestly, I could go on with these nitpicks, but we have to move on. The last 2 waves are worth noting. The 6th wave has a lot of vaccinators everywhere on one of its subwaves, and to then be used a bit for the finale. This final wave starts by spawning 8 giant 3rd degree pyros while simultaneously bringing out a lot of engineers. Then it has giant soldiers with 3 vaccinators per pairing, capping the mission off with a scout chief named Major League. It has relatively low health, can easily be slowed down, and it has 0 support, so it ends in like 10 seconds. This mission in general has underwhelming portions and is mainly a grind fest for the most part. It's also weird with the selection of bots, and at times can be infuriating. Sawdust Storage is D. Alright, up next is Meltdown. We have yet again another intermediate and advanced. Collapsing Core is a 6-wave intermediate, and it is one of the shortest missions to play in Madness, but I say that it is to its benefit. The waves are actually well paced considering that there's actually stuff going on here. It does struggle a bit with ending its waves, where the bots at the end tend to have very little impact. Some of them can be fairly weird, like having giant heaters to cap off wave 5 with Uber medics initially, and then afterwards having them with crits medics. Again, it's pretty weird and you barely feel the difficulty increase. There are some rather bad custom bots though. In particular, there's the giant pyros with the slow effect, just to further discourage close engagement. Then it has chief black boxes, which are a little out of place within the intermediate label. There's one on wave 4 that acts per usual, but with additional rockets per burst, and it heals by a substantial amount. And then there's another chief black box at the very end of the mission. It also comes along with a chief overclock medic that seems to only uber the soldier themselves. Anyway, the soldier is just a barrage black box, but still kind of acts like a burst fire with how fast it shoots. All things considered though, the mission was pretty good to play through, thanks to the benefit of its pacing as well as some pretty decent lineup of bots in general. Collapsing Cores is A. Fusion and Intrusion is a 6-wave advance with some very noticeable problems in regards to the pacing. The first wave is especially bad here. You do wait for stragglers every so often, and an extremely long time for a giant soldier to come out at the end. Beyond the pacing issues, the mission does have admittedly well varied comps. Of course there are some that are rather bad, including commons with medics, but I mean, yeah, the variety is good. Giants get used a lot more in the second half and can come in pairs, in trios, or with a giant medic, which is quite nice and further adds into the variety within the experience. A very weird weird thing this mission constantly does is have a single bot come out with a bomb quickly, just so the waves can start off faster. Again, another neat gesture, although it is a little scuffed in that you actually have to shoot at it, and they have the full 125 health. The mission has a few custom bots, majority of which are weapon swaps and aren't too bad. But unfortunately, this mission has the stinky cow manglers that burn you. The final wave doesn't really do a whole lot. You get another custom bot being Colonel Barrages that fire infinitely. Then at the end are burst fire soldiers that are split between those that are pocketed by giant crits and those that don't but could have support medics. It's kind of a weak finale, but overall I was still pleasantly pleased with what the mission offered. Fusion and Intrusion is B. Up next is Metro, and there is only one mission here. Choir of Robots is a one-wave advance. Where all the past missions have tried incorporating custom bots in some way, this one doesn't do it at all. In fact, you'll just be fighting vanilla bots the entire way through, and the mission will gradually have every single bot be crit boosted, aside from 6 out of the 8 giant deflectors that start to appear by the second half. About the biggest compliment I can give is that the mission is at least solidly paced, barely any subwave lags behind or when you're waiting around, but that's all there really is to this mission aside from it being an endurance. I guess a few oddities worth pointing out are the tanks here. You'll get 2 groups of 5 tanks back to back in a train line somewhere around the midpoint, then the final wave will cap off with the last 2 giant deflectors being chiefs, and are both crit boosted. Sure, the mission's pacing is fine, but I mean, what even happens here? Well, I guess I'll tell you a couple of weird things about this mission. The title itself is apparently a shorthand version, and the name of the mission is actually called The Angelic Choir of Dying Screaming Robots. The second thing is that apparently this mission was so significant for its time that someone decided to write an entire Steam guide on it. This guide basically tells you how to play as certain classes here, where to place buildings as engineer. Hell, there's even a tank infographic with their health bars and notes on the boss that come with. Holy shit, dude. Yeah, shit. Shout out to my boy Metro guy. Anyway, I'm putting Choir of Robots in C for having a pretty average experience nowadays. Next up is Oilrig, 1 intermediate and 1 advanced as usual. Terrorist Simulation. Terrorist Simulation, what the fuck is his name? The 6-wave intermediate is a common grindfest as one would expect. However, there is a significant amount of hit scan used here, ranging from SMG snipers to pistol scouts to many shotgun bots. It also has a custom giant grappler heavy, which wasn't that hard to deal with, but hit scan in this mission is incredibly obnoxious. Aside from the custom hit scan bots, there's the giant soldiers appearing on the last 2 waves. At first, they'll initially spawn as smoke soldiers that don't do much, but obviously just has the large explosion effect. And once again, it is annoying. And then there's the nuker soldiers. They're just charged soldiers but aren't crit boosted and actually have no damage bonus. Instead, they just have triple the blast radius. Not much happens in between, but towards the end, there is a chief variant of the SMG snipers being Hacker Terrorist. Only things to remark here are the custom bots and the amount of hit scan porn, but otherwise not much really happens. Terrorist Simulation is D. Rescindment is a 7-wave advance with a rather interesting start. Every single robot here is a pyro, with the majority being fire-based as usual, while resorting to bullets and explosives later on. Though its ending can be rather bad when the rocket pyros are crit boosted, and then you just have a giant gas pyro with giant furies at the end that can just explode people. First wave overall wasn't too bad, but holy hell, as soon as you get to the rest of the mission, the pacing here ramps up to extreme levels. In every single wave, there is not a single moment where you aren't taking a small break. Giants have very short spawn times in between, and the chiefs throughout spawn immediately after all giants are destroyed. Because of this, the mission is one of the shortest experiences to get through, and weirdly it works, especially when you compare this mission to the others, because the waves here do jump straight into action, and it makes the experience here a much more engaging one. As one would expect, this mission has custom bots, and there is a lot of them that deviate away from those that you're used to. There is obviously a lot of custom pyros, including those that do more afterburn damage, and the most horrendous ones being those that can throw exploding gas at players. Then there are these super giants the mission deploys towards the second half. The rapid fire soldiers and demos here will shoot much faster than before, and there is a single ultra rapid fire demo at the end that gets more health. Honestly, for what it is, these custom bots aren't really detrimental to the fast-paced experience the mission is going for, although the exploding gas pyros in this mission can get fucked. The only other bad thing about this mission are its tanks, and they're all kinda weird. You get this tank at the last part of wave 2, however, because of the fast pacing, the charged soldiers here die super quick, and it takes forever for the fan scouts to spawn in and support the tank. Then it has these super fast tanks on wave 5. It'll start with 1 initially before bringing out 2 at once. The final wave starts with this chief flog pyro that is uniquely able to taunt instantly for a few seconds of uber every so often. A lot more custom bots get used, some that are the more extreme variants of themselves. There's a single giant heavy with the only armored crits medic in the entire mission, and then finishing off with a chief demo that uniquely rapid fires arrows infinitely. The mission is super fast paced and has a lot of weirdness to it, and it does have a few infuriating custom bots, but somehow I can walk away saying it's one of the better experiences in Madness. Rescindment is B. Next on up is Outlands. Oh boy, we are gonna be here for a good while. There are 4 missions to get through here. Rural Roadblock is a 7-wave intermediate. Fun fact, this is my oldest recording on Menace vs. Machines. Yeah, you can tell how much I didn't bother to revisit missions I've already completed. One word to describe this mission: slow and boring. 2 words actually. And there are waves where quite literally nothing is happening. The right flank doesn't get used a lot, which is fine for an intermediate, but whenever it does, the bots there usually boil to nothing or just have walk-in engineers, which can just easily sneak by just because the mission is so easy to spawn camp. By the way, this mission among others here will have weird terms for their bots. They were already present in Canteen Crasher, but yeah. Final wave is where a few things happen. Get a few giants with bullet vaccinators, one of the 2 tanks ambushes from behind, then 7 rapid soldiers come out with bushwhacker mini giants, weirdly enough. And then you just have a tank finale with bonk supports where nothing is happening. Cool. Rural Roadblock is D. Antecedent Sapience is a 7-wave advance. The mission moves at a moderate pace and uses the right flank a lot more, so something does happen here. And like I always say, the custom bots here muddy the experience. They tend to betray your expectations of what you normally expect, such as the Crits medics being slightly armored, the Demo Knights on wave 3 being push knights for some reason, and then the mission will use 2 variations of rocket rain soldiers, the first being just a burst fire with a giant clip size, while the second is what you would expect. But by far the worst custom bot to come across is at the end of wave 3. It is a Chief Flare Burst Pyro that heals on kill, which, wow, I have 2 nickels for the missions that have the same template. The damage they deal is extremely enormous as one would expect, pushing by an unnecessary amount compared to the subwaves before it. Beyond that, the other waves are honestly fine for what they are, but wave 6 also has a shit ending, where with this giant demo combo, it also spawns groups of mini giant bat scouts that are really spongy and exist solely to grab the bomb. The final wave will have 2 tanks that both spawn from behind separately. You'll also get this armored burst fire icon for a giant soldier that is more like a barrage and reloads instantly, and it's just called Super Armored Fire Soldier. Aside from that, you kind of fight a little bit of everything from before, and then you'll kill a chief soldier named The End, which, just like the Armored Fire Soldier, it's actually a barrage soldier that shoots faster but with slower projectiles. Like I said earlier, the mission is tainted by the amount of custom bot designs, which ruined what would have otherwise been a fairly decent experience. Antecedent Sapience is D. Dead of Night is a 7-wave advance, and somehow in this never-ending journey of getting through 98 missions, this mission has the longest success time of 30 minutes. And say it with me: slow pacing. Oh my goodness. The mission spawns so few amount of bots at a time, and you're killing them faster than they can respawn. The waves take forever to start because of the map's drop down, the downtimes are too long, and the subways in general take too long because all the bots get stretched far apart with their constant wait betweens. It's such a massive shame because the bots that you fight throughout really aren't that bad. Sure, there are some bad sections where you do grind through commons, a couple of annoying giant templates including Natashas and fan scouts that are uniquely armored. There is also a chief heavy at the end of wave 6 that is able to pierce your resistances, but I would still say that these bots as well as the compositions throughout are inoffensive in the grand scheme of things. The main problem is just waiting in between them. The final wave is pretty much most of everything that you already fought before, including the custom templates. One of the 3 tanks here does spawn behind in the beginning, before the rest spawns in front near the end, and it'll cap off by having 2 giant armor piercing heavies alongside the final tank. Overall, what would otherwise could have been a decent mission is held back significantly by its insane amount of padding and length. Dead of Night is D. Out of Options is a 5-wave expert, and the slow pacing is still with us. Thankfully, it is at least acceptable with expert missions in the early game. The bots here do actually put up a fight, and the slow pacing does allow for forgiveness. Unfortunately, it does overstay its welcome beyond that, which does hurt the overall scaling of the difficulty quite a fair bit. It does have this kind of interesting ending subwave where it has a giant squad of a burst fire demo with 2 SMG snipers having uber medics. Of course, Spy just shreds them, but it was certainly a design choice. Kinda wish I wasn't a main tank buster here because goddamn do you shoot these ambushing tanks for a long time where none of the other bots can push forward. The 4th wave starts with a segment where soldiers cannot play the game because it has a whole bunch of reflex pyros. The only real challenge here is staying awake for the 12 giant scatterguns that slowly trickle about, and of course one straggles in by the end. You'll also get these giant crit on kill heavies that eventually get vaccinators. Nothing too terrible, but why have vaccinators of a single type this late into the expert? Final wave, we have our 3rd ambush tank with a lot of health. Yay. Well, at least the final tank spawns from the front to break the repetition. This finale though just has giants moving in one by one. There's also these crit pyros and soldiers that are derivatives of their broken parts variants with some slight changes. But besides all that, yes, this expert is slow and boring. Out of Options is D. Up next is Oxidize, except it's the green version. There is an intermediate and 2 advanced missions to get through. Greenhouse Roughhousing is a 3-wave intermediate, a rather unique take on a label, but it's an intermediate, so everything here mainly consists of commons to grind through. For the most part, the mission wasn't too bad in this regard, but here we have custom boss with hidden stat changes once again. First wave was particularly rough, hey, when it comes to the charged soldiers, simply because they are allowed to crit boost on kill, and you are never told about this until you or someone else gets killed by it, so that's cool I guess. And wave 2 is where nothing happens. Seriously, the wave just has commons and banners to grind through for the most part, until something does happen by the end, where all of a sudden you're put through a mid-wave break where the active bots get disabled, surprisingly. But this mission absolutely did not need to spam 10 mini-sentries before it. The mission then proceeds to waste 20 seconds of your life just to spawn in the chief stun soldier. It has a tremendous amount of projectile speed with its rockets, and they are called Sunlock Soldier because if you get tagged, you literally cannot do anything and be forced to die. Final wave, you get a tank along with a chief loose cannon demo named Absolute Donker of a Demo. And because they are a rapid fire burst variant, it's another Sunlock boss that insta kills. Grind more commons, giant heaters and bazooka soldiers separately, final tank with no final skin, and then giant sticky spammers. The bosses here are a major sour spot for the mission, but besides that, the mission overall wasn't too bad and is somewhat decent. Greenhouse Roughhousing is C. Mannure is a 7-wave advance, and is one of the more gimmicky missions. This mission allows the boss to shoot out of spawn, and it will start every single wave off with a giant volley soldier, increasing in count over time. In here, they're basically rocket rings with even slower projectiles, and like I said with the previous mission that had a similar subwave structure, it is uninteresting, repetitive, and exists solely to waste your time. The mission supports here are particularly obnoxious. This is among the many missions that features engineers that deploy sentries behind you, but it also has snipers, and the mission will not tell you that they come with uber medics. Nice to know that this is one of the more privileged missions. The first half of this mission was rather mediocre. It initially starts with high counts of fan scouts and giant shotguns the entire way through, and then kinda starts doing the same thing again on the second wave, this time with nail gunners from the scouts to the giant heavies to the crit swarms of said scouts. The third wave just has meaty damage checks for the most part, where there's giant poppers healing giant gauntlets, and there's rapid soldiers with vaccinator medics of separate types that gives them an infinite duration of resistance, so you're forced to wait for others to shoot what damage is being resisted from you. The most noteworthy thing about wave 4 were these Thompson engineers that teleport you up to the sky, as the conch soldiers would theoretically airshot you with a direct hit. Besides that, it has a giant medic that pockets a crits heavy for some reason. Fifth wave is where the pacing of the mission as well as the creative directions shows at its worst. Groups of bots show by themselves without much support, especially when it gets to the giant black box pyro trios. Sure, these bots are novel to fight, but this is really moving towards gimmicky to its detriment. Speaking of gimmicky, after the blinking Ubers with deflectors, it then proceeds to spend 15 additional seconds building up towards the boss because the TF2 music here has to build up. The boss here is a common sniper named the 10th class and just shoots at you with his fast firing sniper rifle. The mission has not given them any sort of knockback immunity, so it is an absolute bitch to target them with soldier and demo, and they can also build buffs with the bomb because they are commons, so the boss already stalls away far longer than necessary. The 6th wave has the support snipers from before, culminating to a chief sniper named Mercenary, who has a giant medic and a squad of commons alongside, all of which are of course hidden from the wave bar. This whole segment was ruined for me because the sniper started immediately taking pot shots, allowing the medic to stay spawn protected, so both of them were invincible for like half a minute. Baiting them away from there was I guess the point of it, but this is seriously a poorly designed segment, because even when fighting it properly, it's not a particularly engaging one. And of course, like among many missions that do this, it doesn't start sending out volley soldiers until much later. Then the rest of the wave is spent shooting demo knights and giant flares that shoot lasers like a railgun, which admittedly it is a novel concept, but once again it is a boring and tedious segment where barely anything is happening. The final wave, after wasting time killing 7 volley soldiers, you get to the final boss, a chief punchy named the Bread Monster. This one is really gimmicky, in that it sucks you in while dealing damage with its highly extended range. The wave also periodically sends swarms of Sydney snipers, which I guess apparently stun you on hit, but they were never able to do anything in my playthrough. Overall, quite a lot of things to say here. The mission is best known for its novelties and the unique boss that don't stray too far towards being atrocious, but the gameplay here leaves a lot to be desired. Mannure is C. Overclock is a 6-wave advance, by far the most normal mission in this map if we're talking bot compositions. The mission is moderately paced and the giants are finely distributed amongst the commons you get through. So far so good. Tanks are really weird on this mission though. The ones in the early game are quite bulky and drag out the wave unnecessarily, and the rest are all used on wave 4, and the 6 tanks here are really squishy and kind of just amount to nothing in regards to their contributions. Mission also has a few weird endings to their waves as well, where the beginning wave just has a trio of super scouts, and the 5th wave closes out with 6 giant heavies basics and a few commons, all the while having uber medic supports throughout. There's also a fair amount of custom bots here, nothing too crazy in the grand scheme of things, but you do have the giant soldiers with bigger heads and on Adderall. There are also these super ice burner heavies that would do more damage against burning players but extinguish them immediately. And then there's a chief variant named Hephaestus that ends out wave 3. This wave also has burning cow manglers. Oh, for fuck's sakes. The final wave is pretty much more of the same as the prior waves, but before getting to the boss, there's this weird segment where you have to kill all of the limited backup soldiers and swarms the engineer bots. Anyway, the final boss is a chief soldier named Crisis, and all it does is it burst fires like a big rock and it crit boosts on kill. And it's all you fight because once again the supports were limited. Besides all that, the mission is pretty okay all things considered. Overclock is C. Now we're on Powerplant. We are going to be spending a lot of time on this map, but in saying that, it is the only map in the second half that has the highest amount of missions. We have an intermediate, 3 advanced, and 1 expert to shoot through. Energy Entropy is a 6-wave intermediate. It's all a common grind fest for the most part. It has a few custom bots that are kinda bad. For example, the common burst fire soldiers where they blow their load instantly and reload very slowly so they barely put up a fight most of the time. Then it swaps a giant heavy's minigun to a Natasha at the end of wave 4 for whatever reason. Not much really happens on the 5th wave, aside from giant soldiers having 1 quick fix and 1 uber per pairing, and 2 final tanks coming out at once. 6th wave, you get to see bison soldiers shooting orange lasers. Besides that, the 2 giants here are a joke, and the 3rd giant is a chief that, oh my god bruh, it's just Sir Nukes a lot. The only difference here is that it shoots 2 bombs per clip with a much shorter fuse time, so at least it wasn't reusing the same template like Shortwave did. Besides that, the mission is simply common spam up until the end. Energy Entropy is D. Particle Protocol is a 6-wave advance. The mission overall is pretty decent. A pretty good lineup of bots throughout the waves, and they do make enough space for the plentiful of giants to move up. It does have a few bad use cases such as the Persian demos, where they will constantly spawn them in swarms throughout the entirety of wave 4, and only having a little bit of them on wave 5. The pacing is also good with this mission as well, but besides all that, not much else to say on this mission. The final wave starts with big rock burst fires that aren't crit boosted. It starts employing these custom soldiers that auto jump and parachute, which they don't really do a whole lot, especially considering it's the finale. Besides that, there's a single giant heavy combo, and the entire finale consists of 2 tanks alongside 10 giant demos in pairs. Really not the best finale to end it off on, but besides that, the mission is overall rather solid. Particle Protocol is B. Power Program is a 6-wave advance. The mission has some varied comps to look forward to throughout, and it does have a kick to it. There are some bad sub-waves, for instance the ending of wave 2 just having conch soldiers swarming with samurais and steel gauntlets, and wave 4 being rather boring. Just waiting for the giants to drop down where there's blast soldiers every now and again. There are a decent amount of custom bots here, but nothing too offensive all things considered. What is offensive is the 5th wave. It is an absolute grind fest, from the commons to the plethora of giants. There's also support tanks spawning by a fairly decent rate, and as per usual, they'll stall out the waves once all main robots are killed. The final wave has even more custom bots, many of which are mini giant variants, and it has many crit boosted giants including pyros and black boxes, pushing it to the limit towards the end with the Spartan Rocket Rain, which is a chief Rocket Rain soldier. The supports get spammed quite a lot here, but the ending was still somewhat manageable. This is a decent mission overall, but the last 2 waves here kinda suck. Power Program is C. Voltaic Outrage is another 6-wave advance. Compared to the other missions here, this one has taken far more liberties with its custom bots, and it's for the worst. Not 2 minutes into the mission and you're already dealing with annoying crowd control. There are swarms of fan scouts along with a few Sandmans going around. Then at the midpoint of the mission, it will send out swarms of loose cannon demos. The custom giants here also suck. There's the Bullet Maniacs, which simply just have double the amount of health from your typical heavy. There's Rocket Rains too, but they're kinda bad here because it seems like this mission makes them reload slower than usual. And holy crap, what is this giant demo on wave 5? They have the burst fire icon, but clearly that was to trick you as they are just nuke demos that just slowly shoot out massive explosive tanks and are called tank launchers. In regards to the mission's waves overall, they aren't the worst I've seen if we're talking bot compositions. Some of the endings do feel limp at times, other times atrocious, like the first wave ending with massive swarms of Mangler soldier supports, but really it's a custom boss in these missions that muddy the overall experience. You do get a few funky chiefs though, one such as on wave 4 being this enormous Rocket Rain soldier that, like among the others, it is kind of a cakewalk. And then there's the one on the final wave. One would expect this soldier to be an infinite barrage soldier befitting of its icon, but nope, it's just a soldier that shares every single property with a barrage all except their firing speed, and their name is Powerplant Surveillance. Beyond the soldier, there's not a whole lot to see aside from several crit boosted giants and armored capper scouts that for some reason have 3rd degree properties. And then the finale will just have 3 bullet maniacs with giant vaccinators of separate types, and no support bots around. This finale is boring and kinda sucks, and the latter applies to the whole mission. The Voltaic Outrage is D. Unoptimized Output is yet again a 6-wave mission, but at least it's expert, hooray! But I wish I could be more excited about this mission. Many of the subwaves here tend to be grindfest, and the major difficulty spikes throughout only comes from the high-skilled heavy spam being deployed every now and again. Wave 4 is pretty egregious in this regard, sending deflector heavies and swarms that will eventually have trio vaccinators per pairing, which Jesus Christ are they oppressive. Or hey, how about these dickheads? Natasha heavies ranging from swarms of them to giants, and combining these guys with giant scorch shots, oh how lovely. Nice to see that mobility classes just get occasionally shut down. Besides all that, the endings of the waves also tend to suck. Wave 1 wasn't too bad overall, but it has these pyro ubers that will stall out the wave if you do not kill them, because there can only be one pair active at a time. And then there's a 5th wave having these giant bonk scouts, and you killed everything but them at this point. Only 2 are active at a time, and they take forever to spawn in between. The final wave is an absolute grindfest, and it is the longest wave of the mission. Giants are in high numbers, several commons throughout, including pyro ubers from earlier but now coming too. 5 pairs of giant jumping sandmans get used towards the end, however you can kill them all before the final tank reaches half health, so we have yet again another ending that sucks. Overall, this expert can be bad to play at times and relies on a lot of heavy spam throughout. Unoptimized Output is D. Now that we're done with all of that, let's proceed on over to production. Just 2 advanced missions here. Distillery Destruction is a 7-wave advance, and if this first wave tells us anything, it's that we have slow pacing throughout this mission. Many of the bots here don't do a whole lot with regards to the compositions. Plenty of the subwaves here are very easy to spawn camp. Giants and the commons can't make enough space to push out of the front. Not to mention that some of the bots here are just straight up goofy. Like how there's a chief combo in wave 3 consisting of a regen medic named Dr. Stead and a heal deflector named Boton that for some very bizarre reason takes 50% more damage. Or the custom burst fire soldiers ending out wave 6 where they fire a boatload of rockets that are tremendously slow. Am I playing advanced or intermediate here? Okay, how about this? A chief sticky spammer demo at the end of wave 5 with very little support, being named Mr. Boombastic. I'll give the mission this. It was at least having fun with it. Wish I could say the same at this point in the operation. The final wave will have the last goofy sub wave, with it having a dual chief pair consisting of a demo and a soldier, and they do not have boss health bars and are referred to as best buds. Not much else happens in this finale for the most part. The mission overall is quite bad, but it is far from atrocious. Distillery Destruction is D. Frightful Freight is a 6-wave advance. The first wave is terrible, much like the previous mission, but for different reasons. It's a bit of a grind, which is fine, but then it has 18 battalions and they all come out alongside superfans, which make for a really bad difficulty spike. And then it just ends all limp with a giant heavy just having ubers. Besides all that, you don't really see a whole lot with this mission, aside from getting through all the commons and giants with a few subways where nothing is happening. The goofy ass bots include a chief nuke soldier on wave 2 being Sergeant Dukem, and that's pretty much it until the final wave. I honestly prefer it this way because at least the mission still plays decently in the grand scheme of things. Final wave, oh boy. Okay, so here is where the other second goofy chief is. This one is the Iron Beast, and it's way bigger than your typical giant and shoots significantly faster the lower its health gets. Besides that, you will grind through so many Demonite supports throughout the finale, some of which will combine with giant backup soldiers, which is not at all great. And the last subwave just has a tank along with 3 giant heavies. Mission overall is fine, and that's pretty much it. At least the pacing was better than the last. Frightful Freight is C. With production out of the way, we are gonna be on some one-off maps in this operation for a while, starting with Quetzal. Dazed Disassembly is a 6-wave intermediate. Despite that, the waves in this first half fall into advance. Weapon swaps are everywhere on that second wave, and is the second worst one. The Demonites here are the biggest offenders, because they just get a flat 50 health boost for not using the Islander, and yet they still wear the booties. There's also Colo Scouts with babyface blasters, and they don't lose their boost on hit. The fourth wave is the worst wave, and that's because it has the same steel gauntlet start as the first wave, and there's nothing really happening here because the bots are in their own individual subwaves, and the 4 giant demos just come out all together. The mission's use of the right flank is pretty egregious, and what I mean by that is that a lot of the time there is no build up to whenever they're used, making the flanks feel like they just spontaneously happen. Such as the 5th wave where the support soldiers drop down from the main spawn, and because every single Madness mission loves delaying super scout spawns, the Major League here is allowed to flank from the right and possibly backcap the bomb. Final wave has nothing of significance aside from spawning a bunch of score shot pyros at one point, and the last wave just has a chief conjurer with their weapon swap to the black box. The mission doesn't know that it's supposed to be an intermediate in the first half, and is overall rather bland and does some rather infuriating things. Dazed Disassembly is D. Quetzal is done, and now it's... Oh, fuck! It's radar. There's only one mission here, but damn it all, man. Recursive Reinforcements is a 6-wave intermediate. If you've been a part of my journey throughout Canteen Crasher, you'll know how absolutely abysmal the 2 missions from there are, and how atrociously loud the map's air raid siren is. This mission has a considerably less amount of bullshit compared to the others from there, mostly in regards to the custom bots, but thank god it doesn't have them. But my god is the madness DNA present here. The mission just has you grinding through commons for several waves straight, and giants that don't do much in this mission. And Jesus, the fucking siren! This map just blares it so loud and so frequently, all because the missions just can't go through a single wave without airdropping the bots. Hey, wanna know another bad issue with this map? If you have the bomb on the left side of the map, any giant that comes down from the opposite end can just get stuck under a scaffolding and they cannot path out of it, so that's cool. There's only 2 chiefs that you fight through, and it's towards the last half of the mission. There's the Chief Barrage Soldier that parachutes down from the sky at the end of wave 5, and they are simply named Major Barrage. And then there's the final wave, which besides it being just the same song and dance as the prior waves, ends out with a Chief Heater Heavy named Colonel Firestorm that is able to shoot rockets. This mission may be featured on the worst map and has quite possibly the worst ASMR experience Madness has to offer, but it is by no means a Rocky Ravage. Recursive Reinforcements is D. Oh Christ, it's over. Alright, well here's another one-off map. Redstone Ridge. Armored Apparatus is a 6-wave advance, but this mission is too damn easy to be called that. Not a lot really happens here. It does have plenty of melee fodders in the beginning that slowly but surely reduces, which is somewhat neat. The pacing ranges from moderate to rather sluggish towards the second half, and what happens here is that the mission will at times have common-only subwaves, and like I always say, they tend to amount to nothing burgers 99% of the time. This mission does have weird naming conventions though. The pyros here are called Arsonists, and any robot that gets crit boosted are referred to as Angry. It does frequently use a lot more banners towards the second half as well, and you will always run into any of the conches or banners. There's one chief somewhere around the midpoint, which is just a demo knight named Samurai Jack. Final wave starts with a nothing burger set of commons, followed by 3 tanks back to back, and there's the second and last chief of the mission being Grandpa, which is a heavy that simply heals on hit. Overall, it's a pretty underwhelming mission. Armored Apparatus is D. Next on up is Rust Valley, 1 intermediate and 2 advanced missions to cover here. Restless Robotics is a 6-wave intermediate. I am happy to say that this is the shortest mission in all of Madness, at around 12 minutes. And that's not only because the waves are short, but the lineups are also short as well. This mission in general doesn't really do a whole lot, but considering that it's an intermediate and it wasn't wasting much of my time, I'm honestly fine with it. The midpoint of the mission is really its only worst component. Wave 3 just goes on for a very long while and stretches out its main lineup of bots amidst a plethora of gate bot scouts and exploding cavers. Then there's wave 4, which isn't that bad, but it has soda popper scouts that for whatever reason are set to auto jump every few seconds. The tanks here don't really do a whole lot, which is whatever, until the wave uses it to end things off, which nothing really happens here. Besides all that, the only weird detail I can remark are the bowmen, which for some reason all have the Burly Beast cosmetic. The final wave is a boss wave and you waste, oh for fuck's sakes, 30 seconds just for a chief heavy to come out named Groundwater Titan. It uses an Australian minigun that heals on hit and does quite a lot of damage. Besides all that, the mission is pretty good, and it is short, thank god. Restless Robotics is B. Roadblock Retaliation is a 6-wave advance. It is the same story as the intermediate, though it isn't too short, but the ending subwaves here are its major weakness. Some of them you do spend quite a long while to get through and just having to grind through a plethora of comments. But then there are also subwaves where the main targets are by their lonesome. There's like only 2 of these, including giant backups that survive far longer than the tank and the bowman. And then with wave 5, where you have one of the 2 tanks spawning halfway. You kill it and then move on to every single bot in the entire wave and shoot them pretty fast, only to then have the second tank spawn in so late when everything's dead. The final wave starts with 5 giant deflectors back to back, which can both be killed super quick due to the lack of supports. Buying plenty more commons and the last 2 deflectors, get this pretty cool bulldozer tank, which is exclusive to the map and is honestly pretty cool to see. But of course, since it spawns way sooner than the giant demos, it gets crumbled and all you fight here are said demos coming from separate spawns simultaneously. By all means, this mission has plenty of flaws, but they don't at all make it a bad experience to get through. Roadblock Retaliation is C. Rodeotron is a 7-wave advance. Yeah, this is one of those missions that we're going to be going through, but despite that, there's not a lot of bots here that are all too noteworthy to pick apart. Of course, with this mission taking the gimmick direction, there are many subwaves that are just weird, but so much so that you have to question how the judges looked at this mission and said yes. There were heavyweight champs in the first wave, and we all call them punchies because they run around trying to punch you, but this mission calls them brownies because they use the Apoco Fist and their headgear is painted brown, which I get it, but it's a little too on the nose here. Or how about this? Caber demos on wave 3 with the Desert Marauder cosmetic and then calling them suicide demos. Yeah. Besides these edgy nitpicks, the one word I can describe this mission is padding. This is one of the longest missions in Madness. Thankfully, the pacing in between bots moves moderately, so it is the more fun kind of padding, but the subways in general mainly consist of one or two varieties of bots, and a lot of the time, the giants here are really spongy, or the commons are in extremely high counts and they take a long while to get through them all. The only thing carrying these subways are their novelty designs, which I will admit they are cool, but when you're stretching every single one back to back for a long while, the specialty here wears off and just overall becomes a chore. By the way, this is one of those missions that starts every wave off with a giant increasing in count over time, and here we have armored sandmans that further adds to the overall padding and waste your time. The only good wave here I would commend this mission for is wave 6, and that's because it introduces an invincible support sniper with very bad tracking but can insta-kill you in one shot. They are rather interesting mechanic wise, and you actually have to engage with the mission. It is also the fastest wave here aside from the final one because it spawns the bots at a fast pace, and it has its high counts of giants in pairs and in groups of 4 separately. Before moving on though, I want to mention a Chief Demo Knight on wave 4. It is able to deal high damage against anybody that is wet from the slow moving milk scouts, but upon being destroyed it triggers this awful sounding noise. The final wave is a boss wave, and I say that despite the wave bar suggesting otherwise because it is a perfect example of padding. You start by killing 7 armored sandmans and then move on over to 22 crit pyros that do nothing, all for a good 40 seconds or so. The boss that you fight is a chief pyro named Dieselnator. It is a pyro that blasts several rockets at a time while simultaneously unleashing a burst of flames, both of which will instantly kill you at close range. There will just be uber medic supports helping it push out of the front, but past that, the pyro just has a lot of health. If we're talking about the entire roster of gimmick missions, this one is a bit more grounded, so it does certainly have a leg up. However, once again with these kinds of missions, the gameplay has aged rather badly and the experience does go on far longer than necessary. Still though, Rodeotron is C. Up next is Sequoia. We have another set of missions to get through, 2 advanced and 1 expert. Forest Fight is a 7-wave advance. For the most part, you'll just grind through a plethora of commons and shooting down giants and tanks every so often. And yes, I'm playing with the real Wheezy here. The mission only gets somewhat interesting when you get to wave 5, and that's because it starts using custom bots, but none of which are too noteworthy to speak of, and the few that are used just as their weapon swapped. The final wave is pretty much more of the same, but you have a lot more varieties of smaller medics being utilized besides uber medics. The majority of giants are crit boosted, and before you finish, it will have a chief barrage soldier named Captain Minicrit. This finale kinda sucks given that triple banners are simultaneously active, but overall the mission is simply middling and inoffensive. Forest Fight is C. Woody Weedouts is a 6-wave advance. As per usual, you get through commons with however few giants are in between. Pacing is noticeably more sluggish compared to the previous one, and some of that is owed to having a few subways that mainly consist of commons, but there are also times where the mission spikes up in difficulty by having a crit boosted giant at the end. There's a few amount of custom bots here and there, the most notable of which are uber shield medics that stack onto each other while pocketing a giant, which is annoying, and one other thing I can remark is just how disgustingly low the payout here is. I never paid much attention to payouts amidst the 77 missions we covered up to this point, but Jesus, you just deal with a plethora of spam and crit boosted giants at the end of wave 5 and all you get is a maximum of $500. Anyways, you get even more shield medics that thankfully aren't ubers in the final wave, but besides that, you get a plethora of super scouts and trios, and giants pocketing heavies and pyros. Only noteworthy thing here is that the engineers get teleported in extremely late here and end up not mattering at all. Besides that, the mission is just whatever. Woody Weedouts is C. Forest Catastrophe is a 6-wave expert. The mission overall relies a lot on using uber medics throughout. For the most part, they are used for giants to frequently end out the waves, though at times they will pair them up with commons. The most notable and annoying example are the swarms of bad scouts in wave 5, where every single one will be paired with ubers. Then another noticeable trait with this mission is that it loves deploying heavies in massive groups, as well as having giant variants throughout. And much like any other experts, they're really the only difficulty spikes presented amongst the waves featured. Besides that, there's not really a whole lot to this mission. It mainly comprises of vanilla templates, which is fine, but like nothing noteworthy happens here. That is until the final wave. Massive quantities of giants get used here, and it is a giant grind fest. And not only that, there are 6 giant deflectors that get used at the end, and every single medic pocketing them is a giant popper. This is not only the most challenging wave to get through, but it is long and extremely tedious because each pairing takes forever to get through. Overall, it's a pretty boring expert with a boring way of scaling the challenge. Forest Catastrophe is D. We're on Shiver Peak now, and it only has 1 expert. We are going to be coming back to the one-off maps for a while. Shudder is a 7-wave expert. Not too much really happens, but it does have much more of a bite to it compared to the previous one, which is welcome. The variety of bots you get through are decently composed in the first half, even though a majority of them are vanilla. There are a few custom bots, although the giants you see there are really scuffed and barely do anything. For example, you get to this rapid fire soldier firing in bursts at the end of the first wave, and it can be destroyed fairly quickly despite how destructive they can be. And there's a giant steel gauntlet amidst the giant heavies with Ubers, and it doesn't really do much of anything besides approaching menacingly and soaking up damage. By the 5th wave, however, the mission starts taking a turn, and it starts becoming insanely grindy. This 5th wave has you grinding down 5 tanks as well as 12 giant soldiers for the entirety of it. Then the 6th wave will have 5 of the classic giant deflector popper combos, further adding to the overall grind of the second half. And there's even more giant soldiers that don't do a whole lot even with small Ubers. And the final wave, holy moly, is a giant grind fest. It starts by you grinding through commons, so the giants don't even appear until later. Thankfully there's far less poppers here and only used at the end, but it's just giant deflectors, major leagues, and giant demos the entire way through. The first half of the mission is pretty good, but goddamn does the second half become insanely tedious. Shudder is C. After Shiver Peak comes Silent Sky, one of the more unique maps of this operation. Aerial Stupidity is a 5-wave advance. Now this is a rather grindy mission, a lot of commons spew throughout, and it's also supplemented by robots including giants that parachute down from the sky. This one is at least infinitely more bearable compared to Radar because the map uses a far more quieter alarm sound for the airdropping bots. Of course all that is owed to the title of the mission, but the second word of it is also within here. At times certain names will pop up like Easter eggs, particularly the quick fixes that forgot the Uber, or buff soldiers that may randomly get the name tag Poop 2. But most of the stupidity comes from the mission's use of tanks, where at some points they will airdrop from the sky by parachuting in, or just dropping straight down and exploding. It is definitely memey, however the final wave is not. It is the longest wave of the mission. No, actually, the entire operation. It's much of a grind fest like all other missions finales, but then it has this midway break around 3 minutes in. Then you kill even more robots and a few tanks, further adding an additional 3 minutes. Then you wait and an additionally long time for the boss of the wave, who is a chief pistol scout named Ace 9000 that swaps between pistols, including one where the shit spams a ton of projectiles. Things would have ended here, but nope, the mission just spawns in the last support tank parachuting in near the hatch. This last wave truly has an ungodly amount of padding, and it sucks because the mission would have otherwise been much better without it. Aerial Stupidity is C. Now we're on Skull Cove, you know the drill. Slaughterhouse Screamhouse. Interesting name, is a 3-wave advance. The first half of this first wave I can only describe as being stupidly designed because all the bots here spawn in one spawn point and you're sitting here spawn camping the bots freely. There's plenty of custom bots thrown in here and there and none of them are that atrocious, which is fine and dandy. Besides all that, the mission is fairly grindy with a lot more giants being utilized throughout, which do put up a fair fight I'll admit, so the mission isn't entirely sleeper. It does like to end their waves out with chiefs though. The first is just a punchy, which is honestly a complete fucking joke and barely does anything. Thankfully the second one isn't, which is a chief rapid fire soldier with the buff banner, but yet again it is rather boring. The final wave will initially start with a 4-tank train that pushes you quite a fair bit without a pyro. Besides all that, it has a shit ton of crit spam added onto what is basically the same song and dance as the 2 other waves, finishing off with a chief soldier rapidly shooting piss lasers named Laser Lord. Overall the mission is fine and simply sits at room temperature. Slaughterhouse Screamhouse is C. Next up is Snowpine. This time we have 2 missions to cover here. Shattered Ice Shard is a 6-wave advance. The mission is pretty decently paced and does have a bit of a bite to it, although admittedly this is due to the map being rather shit. To be fair though, the mission isn't all that oppressive and it is fine for what it's going for. The use of tanks here are kind of bad though, mostly because whatever bot is left on the wave bar takes forever to spawn, and anybody that's defending the main path will just sit there grinding support bots. This repeats like 2 times in the mission and they're both terrible. There's not much to the final wave aside from having a plethora of crit boosted bots, but it does use his Sergeant Crits icon, denoting the custom decorated Chrono Barrages that are called Major Crits. Tanks get used 3 times at the end, and 3 times at this point does the last set of giants get their spawn delayed significantly. Mission overall is decent, but tends to be repetitive. Shattered Ice Shard is C. Raid Resorts is a 3-wave expert. This is one of the worst missions to get through, and it's for a pretty good reason. It is very pushy thanks to the heavy use of the left spawn, and there is a large amount of hit scan being deployed throughout. You're already paying for the crit tax at the start, and there is crit boosted spam including hit scan after 1 sub wave in. The mission is already encouraging you to run shield medics just to avoid all the bullshit the mission throws at you, and it gets worse the further you get into it. What wave 2 mainly comprises of are giant medics, of several varieties, and not a single giant here comes alone. alone. It's boring and tedious because it's the same challenge over and over, asking you to wait for others to deal the other type of damage for you, and the giants here can all stack into a blob. Final wave is probably the least offensive wave here, but it is still pretty bad. Giant medics get utilized over and over again, seeing medics with level 2 shields, and giant poppers pairing up with dragon furies and brass beasts. And yes, even more hit scan including those with crits. At the finale is the final tank alongside a chief shotgun heavy named General Shoutgunner, and it is more rapid fire than it is burst fire. There wasn't a whole lot I could say with this expert, which is surprising given it's one of the reasons why people hate Snowpine, but yeah, a majority of the gameplay comes down to killing giant medics and dealing with egregious amounts of crit spam and hit scan. Not enjoyable to the slightest. Raid Resort is F. And then comes Space Post, where we just have one intermediate. Astronautical Nausea is a 6-wave intermediate. Not much I can say here. You already know how it is with these missions where we're 38 fucking hours in. Which, by the way, is 3 hours farther than the time I completed Canteen Crasher, and we're only 87% done here. Anyways, the only things worth mentioning in this mission are its unusual use of custom bots. There are these fast bomb delivery service scouts that appear on wave 1, and only this wave alone. I'm honestly not sure why these are even here. Then there's the giant Ubers at one point that don't have a fast healing rate, meaning you can just kill their pocket then and there. Besides that, the final wave starts with a chief pyro that you can unfortunately soft lock by hitting it using rocket specialist. The chief is named Alien Hunter, and it is simply an extended flame pyro. What else is there? Pretty ordinary bot compositions, and then a giant deflector squadron with 10 soldiers to cap off the mission. Nausea, well, I certainly have it right now, but otherwise this mission's pretty alright. Astronautical Nausea is C. Alright, now it's time for Steep. 3 missions on here, which means we'll be here for a while. Bandwidth Beatdown is a 6-wave advance, and man oh man does it absolutely suck to play this. The mission is balanced around hard advance, and it is filled with so many custom bots, the majority of which makes the experience here anti-fun. The mission already rolls out triple banners on the first wave. They're melee only, so they're not the worst thing in the world, as well as all the other bots here, including a Chief Samurai at the end, which is honestly a complete joke. But throughout this wave, there's a demo support that just shoots out slow-moving bombs that instantly kills anything that it touches. The second wave overall, though, is absolutely terrible. Vaccinated trios supporting giant black boxes, followed by swarms of milk scouts that slow you down for an entire minute. How fun. And then they just spam common heavies on high skill at the end, so much so that you literally cannot peek or else you die instantly. The supports here are also absolutely obnoxious. A few jumping salmons and sniper heavies, and the worst ones are the teleport engineers, having boosted fire rate on their sentries that'll also kill you instantly. There's not much to the third wave other than it spawning high amounts of demos, and then having main wave spies with enforcers that pierce your resistances with crits. Fourth wave just has robots that jump around a lot, from the pyros that are squatted with giant heavies to the chief rocket bowman that just jumps whenever it wants to for no reason. And then this wave just peters out with a boring segment of 2 tanks inside each other and 40 jumping sandmans. Fifth wave is also terrible and another unfun wave. More slowing milk scouts are utilized, but there are now also jetpack pyro supports that stun people upon landing. And then there are also explosive headshot snipers too. The giants here are honestly bad. There's the giant shields that just come out and pocket the commons, and they don't really react to anything, so you're just chasing them around. There's also these death ray engineers that have a lot more health than your typical giant heavy, though I think because of their AI their targeting is rather shit. But yeah, overall this wave sucks because of the constant crowd control spam. The final wave is a boss wave, and I can at least give my compliment for at least starting quickly, but it's still pretty bad. You have to kill a chief pyro named Hate, and all they do is chuck explosive gas. The triple banner melees return once again, so randomly your damage will just get cucked. And if the rap assassin scouts aren't triggering explosions, the boss is another joke and doesn't put up much of a fight. Overall, this mission is absolutely terrible, and it is somehow harder than every other expert in this operation. Bandwidth Beatdown is F. Malefic Mining is a 6-wave advanced. This mission is considerably more tame than the previous one, and it gives a relatively fine experience. It does struggle to end its waves off though. Many times the mission drags out with its giants lagging behind the commons it came with, though that is fair given the map's rather long and windy layout. The only real bad part of this mission is when it eventually sends out massive groups of brass beasts that also pair alongside buff banners. Besides those hiccups, I mean, you know, it's a standard advanced mission that uses a few custom bots that don't stray away from the norm, and there's plenty of giants to chew through, so it's not entirely a grind to get through, so all's fine and dandy. The final wave just has 3 tanks back to back as well as armored sandmans. There's a bunch of explosive knockback from the demos, which is annoying, but it will end with the third chief sticky spammer of this operation named Steve. And the finale periodically sends a pair of Uber medics to help it push forward. Overall, it's a relatively fine advanced mission with hardly anything worth complaining about. Malefic Mining is B. Scrap Metal is a 6-wave expert. It has a very generic start on its first wave before proceeding to have buff banners squatted with heavies, and these heavies have their weapons swapped to the Brass Beast, so already it's becoming one of those missions. Yeah, the mission will proceed to churn out custom bots, and we all know how bad they can be, especially with the label we're currently on. This wave 2 is a massive jump. We've got the occasional Demo Knights knockbacking those on hits, and these custom Super Scouts with soda poppers that just straight up insta-kill anybody up close while being fast. And of course, the oh so beloved Giant Medics will constantly be relied on for this wave and the next wave. Which, by the way, this is the one and only expert where I failed a wave because they combine them with Blast Soldiers later on that can stack onto each other. And it's not even like the good kind of loss, because once again, the bots encircling the mission are bad. There's also some of the other stupider templates, Dragon Furies for example, that just suck you off on hit and afterburn, and the Giant Pyros here that just have extended range, and Jesus Christ does it become absolutely absurd later on. Not only are there bad custom bots, but the mission also brings in the crit bots from broken parts, and they can also sometimes appear in their non-crit boosted forms. The 5th wave is kind of the only fine wave, cause you're already used to the bullshit the mission's thrown at this point. Even though they use a lot more giant deflectors that regenerate health, they are certainly a lot better than a refund to spy wave. The ending here sucks, and it's only because the heavies lag far behind with their brass beasts. The final wave is a boss wave that starts immediately. The chief is the Prospector Ricochet Pyro, and they are simply a healthier variant of the custom flame pyros with some knockback properties, and can also shoot a rocket periodically. And of course, being the strongest of them all, their flame range is extremely massive. Yes, the flames are map wide, and spies be damned. Yeah, the expert is pretty terrible. It's not fun or enjoyable in any lick of sense. Scrap Metal is F. Up next is Tie-In. Yes, everyone and their mother says this map sucks, we get it. At least be thankful there's only one mission here. Disruption is a 6-wave expert. Where the other experts barely do much with the label or put in some stupid bullshit and pretend it's fun and enjoyable, this one somehow sits in between. You don't get a whole lot of money to work with, but at the same time, the bots aren't all that oppressive and can push a fair bit despite being in fewer numbers. For a couple of reasons, the mission is boring. It relies on crits a lot, using them as crit streaks to pocket giants either with commons or giant varieties, or just having crit boosted commons. With the unfortunate map choice being tie-in, many of the bots here take forever to move forward once the teams get pushed out. To compensate, they have teleport engineers in 4 out of the 6 waves, which can be annoying because the closest teleport location to the front allows them to backline the team. But outside of that, their application is honestly fine. One other bad thing is with how some of the waves end, where they can range from just getting down to the last few commons dragging out, to just being weak overall. Probably the only overall bad wave was wave 5. It's just repetitive for having just a tank, alongside 5 pairs of giant downwards with poppers, as well as 48 Sandmans for 3 to 4 minutes straight. Final wave can also just be considered boring. The wave doesn't really do much of anything and just forgoes the idea of full crit boost, and instead having 8 giant deflectors, several commons including swarms of deflectors on high skill that run alongside 8 giant buff banners. And then there's the obligatory final tank. But yeah, honestly for what the expert is going for, it's far from the worst experiences and remains an overall fine one. Disruption is C. Now it's time for Train Yard. It is yet again another single mission map. Ticket to Die is a 7-wave advance, and we're back down into the bad territory. This mission is a constant grind, and many subways throughout use all 3 spawn points simultaneously. It will also teleport engineers in for every single one of its waves until the last. Considering we're playing on one of the worst maps that is not only audibly noisy with its trains and a friggin' horn, but also has this egregiously split off path for the right spawn, oftentimes you're constantly darting around destroying engineer nests while also camping the right side. Now the bots themselves aren't bad, they're rather inoffensive for the most part and just push whenever it's appropriate. Some of them are kinda weird, like how there's a giant mine layer demo that shits out bombs with long fuse times, and one of them at one point just jumps around with them. There's the super scouts that use a winger and heals on hit. Of course it doesn't do much because they're paper thin. Only one chief gets used in this mission, and it's at the midpoint, whose name is Sergeant Rocket Storm, and they are simply a rocket wall soldier. The final wave is a giant grind fest, shooting them all across the 3 main spawn points. Then it will proceed to cap off by spawning crit boosted gatebot heavies forever and ever until you get through the giant downwards with regens. Overall, a pretty not great experience, especially with the heavy usage of gatebots and the constant amount of teleported engineers. Ticket to Die is D. Transmission is up next. We have 2 missions here. Binary Broadcast is a 7-wave intermediate. This mission is quite slow in terms of overall pacing, where you patiently wait for several counts of a bot to all spawn just so the wave can get on with it. It is also rather boring, and you do spend a lot of time spawn camping. Now at a certain point, you'll be forced to run upstairs and shoot down Demo Knights with a bomb, and painfully wait for all heavies down below to spawn in. I know why the mission had to do this, given it's on a premiere map, but there's kind of a reason the map was never seen past Digital Directive for 6 years by this point. The front absolutely blows. It's an extreme version of Manhattan's where the entire area is open, and the upper path is so far off the beaten path that it becomes a chore defending anything that comes from there. So what ends up happening a lot of the time is that the bots are just randomly allowed to flank behind you, and because nobody wants to go up there, the snipers are just allowed to pester you across the map for free, and there's not really much you can do about it except fall back or have someone run all the way up there just to kill them. Now I am going to complain even further with this mission for its use of walk-in engineers. Jesus Christ, are they so damn annoying. They just spawn so frequently and just go up into the upper lane and are once again just allowed to flank behind with their sentry. Except it's a lot worse here because why the fuck is this mission allowing this to happen? This really is just an awfully designed layout. Two bots to mention in this intermediate, there's a chief sniper that simultaneously throws out bombs and rockets and are simply called Survivor. And then it has its lesser variant showing up near the end. And then in the final wave, where not much of significance happens, it will end with a giant cannon soldier shooting both rockets and bison lasers with his shotguns in a burst. Overall, the mission is mostly dragged down by being slow and boring, as well as the use of spawns. Binary broadcast is B. Signal Shutdown is a 6-wave advance. Not much has changed here. Slow and boring like always, endings always drag out, side path barely gets used like usual, and the bots can freely flank around. You will see far more custom bots being utilized more frequently, and like I say quite a lot, they tend to be rather bad. And those such as fireworks heavies, which were there previously, but they are simply able to burn you on hit with rockets. More giant cannon soldiers that further exemplify their worst qualities since they can just freely shoot past the tank. You do get to see a chief somewhere around the midpoint. By the way, this mission as well as the intermediate plays a clown horn whenever they spawn, I'm not sure why. The chief demo here is named Killer Queen, and are simply a burst fire iron bomber with longer fuse times. The use of tanks here are also pretty boring. Aside from the one coming alongside cannon soldiers, they are always used to end out the waves with a bunch of common supports. To be fair, the third one was actually cool and unique, in that it is a unique teleported tank that teleports in commons. But it does spawn in earlier than the main wave, so the ending here can just drag out. The final wave will jump scare you with the crit attacks, but besides that, not much of interest particularly happens besides deploying bots on the left a lot more frequently. And you will get giant deflectors that alternate between dropping down from the right or from main, and they uniquely can crit on kill. The mission overall is slow and tends to pull out some stupid bullshit, but it's not the absolute worst experience the operation's got. Signal Shutdown is D. Before we move on, allow me to say that we had just covered 92 missions into this operation. Hooray! The other good news is that we had also just covered the last intermediate of this tour, all 27 of them. So we'll now go over the last remaining advanced and expert missions, starting with Underground. Empire Excavation is a 7-wave advance. It's the last gimmicky custom mission we'll cover, though some of what it tries to do doesn't really work too well. The first wave is just triple banner melee fodder. The idea here is that an engineer would set up teleporters around the map, though they actually have to walk around and do so, but the gimmick only really worked on the last 30 seconds of the mission and amounted to nothing. There's giant airstrike soldiers on the next wave, and for some reason they were not deploying their parachutes properly, so they just jump up and be annoying. Wave 4 is the strangest one to get through. You would think that the Chief Conjurer would have support here, but nope, it's all by its lonesome. Then it comes a whole bunch of nail gunner scouts that do appear throughout onwards, and multitudes of giant soldiers, and then giant heaters that burn you on hit, to then finish off with 3 tanks back to back, with giant nail gunners trickling in between until the last tank dies soon after. Yeah, some of these waves you can't tell were made for their time. Although sometimes it gets to the point of being funny, like just having a giant demo knight with its health boosted to a Chiefs level, and calling them that one guy on the group keep. The final wave is a dual boss wave, or so I thought when one of them turns out to be a nuke demo charging in and killing anybody in his line of sight as well as itself. The other chief that you fight is an Admiral Airstrike, and it is simply a chief variant of the airstrike soldier seen earlier. The supports it comes with include medics of quick fixes and vaccinated varieties, and the wave will also very annoyingly deploy mini sentries behind your back. The mission doesn't play too terribly in the grand scheme of things, but yeah, it does suffer quite a lot from having plenty of its unique qualities falling short. Empire Excavation is C. Mineral Mania is a 7-wave advance. The mission relies on medics of several varieties throughout the waves, those including having a giant region at the start of wave 1 and then having several vaccinators later on. But for the most part, the mission does a pretty good job at varying up the waves, some of them featuring a majority of the comments which is just whatever at this point, but you do get other waves with plenty of giants to chew through. Some of the custom bots here are a bit of a joke, like the giant soldiers with escape plans, but then there are those on the opposite end, like mini giant barrages that have much faster projectile speed than their giant counterparts, which is awful, not gonna lie. There will be some other weird compositions you'll see later in the mission, but yeah. The final wave is a boss wave that only takes 5 seconds to start. There are varieties of medics and a few other bots supporting a chief Tomislav heavy by the name of Hydropower Drill, and the only other special thing about it is that it penetrates players. This mission, like I said, uses a lot of medics throughout, but all the waves here are relatively fine in the grand scheme of things. Mineral Mania is C. Rust Belt is a 6-wave advance. The mission is rather slow with its pacing and relies a lot on burst spawns. A lot of the time, you will have giants be isolated from the commons and are easy pickings. This is due to the burst spawns that die easily as mentioned before, as well as the mission putting the commons on the left that also die easily. There will sometimes be moments where the giants get paired together, of which aren't medics, but the problem still persists. The most annoying custom bots in this are most certainly the mini giant loose cannon demos that charge at you. They always come from the left side and they always get spammed out. There's also this weird demo support. It's a keyboard demo that grapples onto you and smacks you, but because it has sniper AI, a lot of the time they don't really do much of anything. There are also the classic triple vaccinators that get paired up with the two chiefs of this mission. The first is simply a shortstop scout with a rather quirky name tag of the mid-level mission boss, and the other is, you guessed it, the final boss wave that starts immediately. These 4 chiefs though are strangely written in Japanese. In order of the wave bar,
最後の強打
or the final blow,
ワンショット
or one shot,
火を閉じる
or close of fire, and then there's
最終硫黄
or the final sulfur. This one is just a chief variant of all the loose cannon demos we saw earlier. I'd probably appreciate the characteristics of this mission a lot more if it didn't come with slow pacing and repetitive use of burst spawns. Rust Belt is D. Alright, from this point onwards, we'll be going through maps with only one single mission, starting with Wizardry, a rather interesting map not only with its art paths and layout, but also what it has going for it. Mechanical Magic is a 7-wave advance, and the mission predominantly features the map's gimmick being the Wheel of Fate, waves where you as well as the bots are affected by various spell effects. The bots are also designed with the spell effects in mind, which is cool to see, although as you can imagine with the gameplay, it is not all too spectacular. The first half of the mission wasn't too bad for what it wanted to show, however the entire first wave is just yellow 90% of the time. It also swarms you with bushwhacker snipers and uber medics at the very end, which is terrible. And that sentiment goes for the next 2 waves, having swarms of conch soldiers on the next one, and then on the 3rd wave ending out with a horseman. Once again, it is cool that killing them ends the wave, but their hitbox is very janky, and they just run around with an extraordinarily high amount of health that it takes forever to chew them down. The midpoint of the map is where it becomes the most tedious. The 4th wave forces low gravity and has many robots inflicting various knockback effects, and the 5th wave is an ubercharge wave with robots yet again inflicting various knockback effects, as well as a billion minute heavies. It does get quite tiring just getting knocked around constantly for 8 minutes here. Then there's also wave 7 being full of crits, which honestly isn't too terrible considering it is fun to one-shot things, but yeah, the spell gimmick has went on for long enough. And there is a certain point where you're just sitting there waiting several seconds for anything to happen. The final wave is yet again another boss wave, waiting 10 seconds for Marasmus to bring out a banana soldier named Potassium Prince. It uses the rocket jumper that burst fires extremely fast rockets with immense knockback and actually does damage. It also periodically spawns banana peels behind itself that inflicts fear on you, which is rather neat. And there's also swarms of spies that come in occasionally. For what the mission had going for it, it had a lot of cool and unique things and was without a doubt interesting to talk about. But considering that there were many tedious segments within it, the experience here does get dragged down quite a lot. Mechanical Magic is D. Now then, that was all advanced missions covered in Madness. All 57 of them. Jesus fucking Christ. All that's left are the 2 expert missions, and after that, we are done here. We'll start with Waterfront. Treacherous Waters is a 7-wave expert. It's one of the harder experts thanks to the short map layout, but it has some rather nasty templates to deal with, such as the giant nuke soldiers firing several rockets per clip. There's also rocket range soldiers that aren't the same rocket range that you're already familiar with, and it also has bullet maniac heavies with 2 times the amount of health. But in the grand scheme of things, the mission really wasn't too terrible. The first half is rather rough, especially considering it starts with crit boosted giant black boxes, but unlike Autonomous Annihilation, they at least give you some starting cash. It also likes to spam barrage soldiers, both common and giant varieties, into squads, and it does get bad especially with the right area's claustrophobic tunnels. However, on the second half, it shifts towards being a giant grind fest, and the mission starts heavily favoring Spy. Funny considering the 4th wave has Girardi spamming snipers to hard counter them. What is worth complaining about though is the infinite supports. They aren't too overwhelming and just usually in 3 to 4 counts, but they have extremely short cooldowns between spawns, so you are always grinding down supports. The final wave, unsurprisingly, is a giant grind fest, but you do get to see the last 2 tanks without the final skin splitting into 2. Plenty of steel gauntlets paired with Ubers as well as several direct hit soldiers, and at the end, you'll wait for a giant squad to come out, consisting of a rocket rain alongside a bullet maniac that gets 2 crit streaks on top of them. This expert does offer a particularly rough experience, heavily relying on using giants to push instead of the commons. For what challenge there is, it's honestly not too bad of a mission. Treacherous Waters is C. And here it is, the final map of this operation, Waterlogged, and we'll be going through the last expert of Madness. Winter's Bite is a 5-wave expert. It has a rather decent start, and actually the waves here are decently composed and challenging enough for its label. However, the mission also has some bad aspects, and a particularly noteworthy one. The map we're playing on is notorious for its right flank being entirely segregated from the main area, and the mission heavily abuses it to an obnoxious degree across its several waves, always needing someone or two to cover it, ranging from the infinite supports to the commons that get paired up with medics including Ubers. And as one might expect, gate bots would come through here, but sometimes you will have those that are not, and they will flank around. Split pushes are fine, but when you're doing it for several minutes straight without stopping, it does get very tedious. Not to mention being unfun when you're the one defending it. That's the one major thing that plays the experience throughout. The other major thing that's wrong with the mission is its final wave. It comprises of one final tank, as well as 3 deflectors and 3 sticky demos, pairing alongside Ubers and crits respectively. This is without a doubt the worst wave of the entire mission if you don't run Spy. Giants will be stacking together, and there's also supports including expert pistol scouts as well as other kinds of mission supports. Not only that, the supports will eventually stop dropping money, so scouts will just get inevitably fucked. The only things holding this mission back is the obnoxious amount of flanking as well as the treacherous final wave, 2 things that makes this one of the hardest experts to complete and are also what drags this mission down. Winter's Bite is C.
We win it all.
By now, I'm sure you may have realized that not a single mission in this operation was given an S rating. Yet. So, if I had to truly name an S tier Madness mission, it would be Platinum Parade. Endothermic Espionage had a few standouts, but the moments in between are rather sluggish and do take a while to get through. Collapsing Core was a surprisingly competent intermediate, but I didn't find this chief to be outstanding design choices, and not to mention a unique set of custom bots being severely underutilized. Kinetic Energy is a very close contender. I do admire the usage of charging demos towards the later half, taking advantage of the map as well as connecting them to its title, but Platinum Parade does more. Although not with the map, cause quite honestly Casino City's layout plays terribly regardless, but the mission on the other hand is exceptional. It has solid pacing and a well-established theme across its 4-way structure. Though it features many custom bots, they did not at all detract from the experience. Platinum Parade manages to strike that balance, a perfect ratio of vanilla to custom where the latter adds or enhances what was already there. Sure, it may be a bit too spammy at times, maybe I would look down on this mission a bit more if me and my team ever got pushed past the front, but there was never a point where I was frustrated with what the mission was trying to do. It was fun, and I'm sure the same went for the mission as well. And for these reasons, Platinum Parade is S. Madness vs. Machines, a co-op contest charity campaign operation, 98 missions, and it all took 44 hours to complete every single one. For what it's worth, I still hold a lot of respect for this operation. It was a community charity event, the very first operation to establish one identity that stuck with the series for the rest of time, and it has without a doubt been one of the most community-driven periods that Potato had ever organized. It truly was the greatest operation ever. But I've said it before in the first part of this mini-series, and so I would like to heavily emphasize it once more by saying that Madness was among the worst operations I had ever completed. This and Canteen Crasher are what I consider as the worst operations to complete in the modern era. They each have their own strengths and are both historically significant, but they are overshadowed by their weaknesses. Canteen Crasher was very interesting to talk about, to say the least, but its severe pacing issues and horribly aged design choices did not make the experience particularly enjoyable. Madness fixed many of the problems Canteen Crasher had, and the moment-to-moment gameplay was improved, but the entire operation was overwhelmingly mediocre. And that much is owed less to the fact that the missions offer lukewarm experiences, but more so the massively bloated lineup. There is such a thing as having way too many missions for one operation, and this is one such example. And the worst part is that if there wasn't so much filler and padding to sit through, if Potato just knew when to stop sooner, then Madness would have actually been a decent experience. But anyway, I am done talking about this big and round operation. Thank you for watching. This 3-part episode on Madness has without a doubt been a long wait, and perhaps something nobody expected a madman to do, but hopefully you've enjoyed every second of it. If you're just like me, you're ready to move on from the old era of community MVM, and I hope you look forward to Operation Digital Directive, the next mainland operation that massively revolutionized community MVM, but became later regarded as the black sheep.
Yeah,